Hello, everyone. Hi there. You're filing in on the right-hand side. Lovely to see you. So, on behalf of the British Council, DCMS, and the VIRI, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Laura Jones, and I am the Cultural Heritage Preservation Lead at the VIRI. I'll be your host for today's session. As you all know from the event invitation, today is the third session in our interactive workshop series, and today we'll be discussing sustainable strategies to cultural heritage protection in a post-COVID landscape. In the series as a whole, we'll be exploring the role that cultural heritage protection has to play in building back better as we move towards a development landscape that could be significantly transformed by COVID-19. These live-streamed workshops will be held every fortnight on Thursdays at 4 p.m. over a period of 10 weeks. The workshops are designed to be organic and responsive, aiming to stimulate debate, generate creative approaches, and identify recommendations and discussion topics for subsequent events. The focus of this session will be on the various areas of sustainability and their application to cultural heritage protection. Alongside our much encouraged audience participation, we've convened a terrific panel of speakers today, each looking at sustainability from a different perspective or discipline. Areas of discussion will likely include sustainability and heritage funding, sustainable project management, environmental sustainability, and the role of communities in sustainable projects, to name but a few. And before I move on to introduce today's panelists, a word or two about the role of our audience. As we've already mentioned, we actively encourage our participants to join that conversation via the chat, not only guiding today's session, but also contributing to shaping the subsequent webinars in our series. We're committed to trying to bring a multiplicity of voices to the discussion, to share our thoughts and experiences, and collectively work to better understand the role that cultural heritage protection can play in a post-COVID development landscape. We'll be using the hashtag #CultureInCrisisConversation, which I'll drop into the chat momentarily, so that people can get involved both during and after the event on social media. Feel free to email us longer questions at cultureincrisis@bam.ac.uk. Now for our fantastic panelists, I'd love for you all to pop your cameras on so we can see your lovely faces. Fantastic, and then change myself to see that in a grid format as well. So today we are joined by Alison, founder and CEO of Julie's Bicycle, Thoa Nguyen, director of the Vietnam Rural Institute's Research and Development Institute, VIRI, Nikki Locke, senior program manager, Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth, part of the British Council, and Richard Sanford, professor of Heritage Evidence and Foresight and Policy, UCL's Institute for Sustainable Heritage. Now, in addition to our panel, we'll also be joined by our youth moderator, Eva Alvadare. Eva will be working with me to pose thoughts and questions to the panelists as we move through the discussion. So that was great. Give us a wave, Eva. Once again, we also have Chris, our live illustrator, joining us, who will be capturing this discussion in real time, drawing on points made during the discussion to produce a visual summary of the different topics that we raise. A little bit later on, we'll also be hearing a testimonial from Elgidius Ichumbakichu, an archaeologist and heritage specialist from the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, who will share his thoughts and a question for the panel later for that one. So with the housekeeping taken care of, I'll begin by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, a little bit about their role and background, and why they're a stakeholder in this discussion. Also, I'm asking you guys in the chat too, let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and why this topic is of interest to you today. So I'll kick off by handing the mic to Alison.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being out there and listening. I'll keep it brief. So my name's Alison Tickell. I founded an organisation called Julie's Bicycle some 12 years ago. It was very much in the context of recognising that the creative and the cultural community is quite uniquely placed to respond to the climate challenge, climate and cultural crisis that we find ourselves in now. So we really do focus on climate change and on the nature crisis. We were founded in 2007 by the UK music industry, and since that time it's really been about how to mobilise direct action right across the cultural community, harnessing the creative community's power to communicate the reality of the climate crisis, but combining that very strongly with actually demonstrating how we can change, how we can transform, how we do things in order to really meet the engagement challenge with all our citizens. We've got a huge amount of resources and support materials for people. We always work on the basis of co-creating. Heritage is a really interesting part of the cultural portfolio, reflecting as it does so profoundly our value systems. And of course, in these days where any response to the climate and nature crisis really needs to put justice as its fundamental core principle, this is a really important moment for culture to take the stage. One tiny thing, which is that culture and heritage really have not been part of the toolbox of responses to climate, either in citizen engagement, community engagement, or indeed from policy. And I think we really are seeing that changing now, and it's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Over to you, Thoa.
So, good evening from Vietnam. So my name is Thoa from Vietnam, and I'm working for a local NGO in Vietnam called VIRI, set up in 1997. So we mainly work for the livelihood improvement for the disadvantaged people, like ethnic minority groups, poor farmers, while caring for the environment and social aspects. The cultural heritage play a very important role, as it can be like a living heritage, and it contributes to improve the livelihood of the people, while have a very strong connections with the biodiversity conservation to help to minimize the climate change. So, for example, if we develop the products, to help the local people to develop the products, is based on the sustainable design and sustainable development philosophy, such as natural dyeing, based on the local technique and local materials. We're also working for the organic products, sustainable products. Actually, since 5 years, we've been working with the British Council and focusing on the heritage-based tourism. And for the actually, our communities groups also facing some difficulties because of the COVID-19, but we struggling, and we found some of the initiative from the communities, and I really would like to share with you. And why I want to join this great event. Actually, for VIRI, sustainable development is our key mission. So I really want to share and learn from you. Thank you very much. You are muted.
From one issue to another. Unfortunately, Thoa, we're a little bit of feedback on your line. I'm not sure whether it's possible to either have a headset or just to try and speak a little bit closer to, but we could hear the majority of what you're saying. It was fascinating. We'll move on to Richard now.
Hi, I never get faster at unmuting. You'd think by now it will be very practiced. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to an interesting discussion, and just looking at the chat, I can see a whole bunch of really interesting different groups and perspectives coming in. So I will keep this very brief. I'm an academic at the UCL Institute for Sustainable Heritage, where we're working hard to make sure that people recognise heritage's role in creating sustainable societies. So it's not just something to look after and manage, but it's also something that's an active kind of producer of the futures that we want. My role there is to bring future thinking, foresight, the kind of structured ways of engaging through evidence with possible futures and heritage together. So on the one hand, we're trying to help the rest of society understand that heritage can be a source of futures, a source of hopes and dreams and what we value, and that should be an integral part of the futures that we discussed. I think at this particular time, that's something that people are more and more receptive to, but also to help the heritage sector access different ways of thinking about the future, to enable us all to kind of move perhaps beyond this idea of prosperity, there's a Freudian slip, posterity and future generations, and actually think in more detail about what are the practical ways, what are the skills that you need to think about managing the future, living with uncertainty, moving forward, in order to be ready for the changing demands on heritage, the changing nature of heritage, new forms of emerging heritage, and making sure that on a practical level we're ready to work with those groups. So I guess essentially what I'm trying to do is connect the past and the future and make sure that we're able to talk about the long-term future of what matters to us.
Fantastic. And that leaves us with Nikki for the panelists.
Hello everybody, I'm so delighted to be here. So my name's Nikki Locke and I work for the British Council, and we're the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities. And since 2018, I've been leading a programme called Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth, which is an action research programme that explores ways in which cultural heritage can improve lives socially and economically. And this is kind of a bit of a new area of work for British Council, and particularly putting these two concepts together. And it was first explored through a research report, which was sharing findings from a sector consultation and international research, kind of asking the question, can cultural heritage lead to inclusive growth? And started to provide an approach. So my job has been to work with some fantastic people, partners, communities, places across the world to put this research into practice through the lens of thinking about it as a global concept with local solutions. And we kind of have a key ethos really of working in a people-centered, responsive and detailed way with and across society sectors and geographies. And we have 3 participating countries at the moment, Colombia, Kenya and Vietnam, who've all developed approaches which are distinct, locally led, unique and relevant to their context. And as well as that, we've been kind of doing wider research around the concept in itself to see kind of how we can understand the concept more broadly and how cultural heritage can bring prosperity and well-being to everyday life. So I guess my stake in this conversation is it's a part of my job to think about how things can be sustainable, but also from a very personal perspective and through my experience of working with the programme and in the UK beforehand with creative people and places and communities here, you know, I really understand and see the transformational potential and power that cultural heritage brings, the value it has, the meaning, the opportunities, and how it has an essential role in our everyday life and how it can bring benefits socially, economically, and environmentally as well. So I'm really interested in this conversation to see how we can ensure strategies for it and to support it as sustainable.
Fantastic. Now, Eva today is our youth orator, and I think it'd be really interesting for the group to hear a little bit about where you're coming from today, Eva, what your background is and what your key interests are in this discussion.
Hi, so I graduated from the University of Virginia 2 years ago. I have my BA in anthropology, and I currently work at the University of Virginia in the Center for Cultural Landscapes. So we are building a database out of a textbook on landscape studies history, and it's based out of the Center for Cultural Landscapes. So I've been learning a lot about how humanity and landscapes and sustainability interact. I'm also very interested in cultural heritage protection from like a museum standpoint. I was a museum docent at UVA, and I plan to go into cultural heritage management law or art law. So.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So I'm going to give you all a bit of an easy one to start with, but I'm really interested to get a general perspective of the group in relation to the current situation that's sweeping the globe. So the question in quite a broad sense is, since this global pandemic, has the way that you've been working changed? And more specifically, has the way that you see sustainability changed in the way that you are doing your jobs and living your lives? Probably one end of those is easier than the other. I'll start with Richard, if I may. Yeah, and feel free to take yourselves mute. I think it adds a little bit of ease of access for a free-flowing conversation.
So I guess, like a lot of people who work predominantly with texts and speaking and so on, I've actually been cooped up at home where I've got to see lots more of my family, which is a joy. And I have been spending a lot of time on Zoom and writing a lot and speaking a lot. And so in that sense, it's been a change in the sense that the choices about how I work have really shrunk, you know. I think there's been an interesting kind of set of rhythm change. So the kind of initial crisis response, both from within heritage, thinking about the kind of immediate lifeline funding, things being set up by various organisations, but also thinking about the university response to COVID and students' well-being, and the kind of making sure that we can kind of prioritise the things that we need to. So that's kind of died down now, and I think now it's I've got this kind of interesting tension between trying to go back to some kind of normal, which I guess most people would say that's not necessarily possible or desirable, but at least some kind of continuity would be nice. And then also trying to seize this moment to say, well, actually, what's possible now that wasn't before? I think with respect to the kind of broader question, I guess I've been really struck by what I see as quite a lot of informal heritage work. And by that I mean work being done outside the heritage sector, not by people working for heritage organisations, but asking in public questions like, what should we keep? What should we bring with us? And what should we leave behind? What can we use this moment to do? And I see that as the kind of question that heritage is really good at asking, that heritage is fundamentally good at thinking about change and decay and loss. Whether that's something you want to kind of accept and work with, or that's something you want to try and stave off for as long as possible. These kind of choosing moments are something that I think the sector might be well placed to help everyone else who's got this new interest in it to discover. So I suppose relating that to, has it changed how I think about sustainability? I guess one of the things it has really done is bump me out of a kind of complacency, where I think of sustainability as an endpoint, a kind of an equilibrium, where everything's in balance. The kind of needs of the present and the needs of the future are in balance, but all the different factors in the system, Nikki, you were talking earlier about systems, and Alison as well, that everything's kind of in balance. And I think, you know, you've got Brexit, or austerity, then Brexit, then COVID, then ongoing climate change, then whatever next year has got, that actually to try and understand how to make things sustainable in a perpetually moving world is the challenge. I guess that's my current reframing, but I can't wait to see what everyone else says.
Brilliant, thank you. And Alison, I can see you nodding along there. I might pop over to you to say, how sustainability changed in the way that you're working these days?
So thanks, Richard. Lots of, I'm sure, lots of resonances with everybody. I mean, I think that you use some really key phrases there. One is grief and loss, and I think that's really important, and it's so critical to the idea of stewardship and what are we stewarding for whom, what's its past, what does it tell us about the past, the present and the future. And grief and loss is now a very palpable sense of everyday living, and alongside that there is great shock. I think that sense of shock is incredibly useful in some ways, and we tend to think of life and heritage and culture as a linear system. It's not. It's full of shocks and sudden changes, and we're just experiencing that now. And that actually that underneath all of that is a recognition that our values are really critical, and this moment has really, I think, has cracked open many of the values that all of us have been living by it fairly passively, and has woken up the fact that we need energy, we need commitment, we need a real passion to bring to this new space that we find ourselves in, that is profoundly about interconnectivity and profoundly about the huge creativity that we find as a community of human beings, but also in relation to the natural world. And if there is a greater call out to respond to heritage, it is around how we have related to the natural world. And this has been very, very helpful in a kind of perverse way. So moving through that grief and loss into a place where we are recognizing that COVID-19 actually is a canary in the coal mine. It is it's a very vivid wake-up call for how, if we do not take stewardship, heritage, a contemporary version of that very seriously and root it in the natural world and in all our communities, we're in deep trouble. So I don't really talk about sustainability because I find it a very vague word. It means everything to anybody, and it usually, or traditionally, has often meant financial sustainability, which is a particular prism. I really think we need to think very much about systemic transformation. We need to understand reparative justice, regeneration and transformation. And this moment has woken that energy up in a way that no amount of climate science or marches on through our streets or terrible weather events or terrible economic events has done thus far. So I feel that it's shocking, it's uncertain, but it is an incredible moment to come together and really take seriously culture and stewardship.
Fantastic, Alison. Now, Nikki, I know that the way that you approach sustainability shares some of those interconnectivities, this kind of broad view, this networked view of sustainability. Has that been something that's changed or improved since COVID, or something you're thinking about more?
I think kind of just picking up on what both Alison and Richard have said, you know, around kind of sort of this moving world and things changing and kind of, you know, moving quite a lot, and how do we do this wake up call, and there's a lot of uncertainty around now, but there always has been, I guess, and sort of, you know, there's something around cultural heritage which, you know, we really now more than ever need to embrace, investigate and strengthen that unique position and value of it in today's changing world. And through the programme that we've been working on, obviously our thing of sustainability hasn't really changed, because it is about bringing social and economic and environmental benefit to the people that we're working with. But I think what I have been, you know, as said before, we've been talking about this idea of a global concept with local solutions, and that hasn't changed. And I think actually that's more important now than ever, more than ever. How can we be locally engaged, globally connected, understand as we move forward that there isn't one size that fits all, but actually there is a lot of different answers and ways and different approaches of doing things, where if we can share learning and connect experiences, bringing together kind of that passion and understanding of why cultural heritage is so important, then, and kind of think about what questions we want to ask ourselves as well. You know, how do we make things sustainable? What value does cultural heritage have for us? And how can we work together as a sector and societies to kind of really bring mutual benefit and understanding of cultural heritage? That's kind of what has been playing on my mind much more than it has been in the past, because I think that we don't know what's going to happen, you know, but we do know, and I do know, that cultural heritage can provide so many opportunities for people. And just one more thing is, you know, one of the ways that we've been working through the programme is around action research. And I think that's very interesting as well, is kind of the idea that we sort of don't know all the answers, but we're in a position where we want to collaborate, work together to try and understand what answers are going to be suitable to this new emerging and evolving world that we find ourselves in. So how can we use action learning, collaboration, cultural heritage, the benefits it brings, to be able to adapt to this changing situation and to kind of imagine our new future together, which is more human, sustainable and inclusive.
Fantastic. And that leaves us with Thoa. And specifically, if I may ask, I know already, Thoa, that your projects in Vietnam embrace many strands of what we would call sustainable working. And during COVID and since COVID, you've had a lot of kind of time to adapt and change what you're doing. Could you tell us a little bit about how sustainability has changed in the way that you're working at the moment?
So thank you very much. So I hope that you can hear my voice better now.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I think that it is not an easy time for everybody. So first, for our own life, first. So I myself, I think that why we have to live in a so complicated practice. Can we make it more simple? Can we live in a more simple way? And so actually, Vietnam get a quite long time lockdown and very strictly. So we have to stay at home. And whenever we get out of the house, we really need a reasonable reason. Otherwise, we get penalty. So it was difficult. But anyhow, when we look back to ourselves and really think that if we can change ourselves first, before we can inspire others, and can we do something that make us happy? So I think that sometimes maybe we don't need so much complicated things. And the thing that really make us happy, that the thing that maybe that's not relating a lot of money and that's not relating a lot of luxury things, but the connection with the people and how for us to feel like useful for others, very important. So that is for their own life. And relating the work, actually, as I said with you, for the heritage-based tourism, of course, no one allowed to go for the tourists because of the COVID restriction. So they feel very, very sad because they have to stay alone in their own house. But within the communities themselves, because they are in the remote area, they still gather together. So they make a phone call to us and ask if there's any way for them to continue to practice their gong performance. And we connected with some, because even during the pandemic, we still have a lot of online meeting like that, everything online, exhibition online, learning online, meeting online. And we say that if just only online, it's can it replace the interaction with the people? Of course not. So we ask the people to join together in the communities and make a kind of a gong performance. So we are willing to pay them the same rate as we visit them. So they were very happy. They make up themselves, dress beautifully, and join together. Really, they welcome a group of the tourists to their communities. So after like a 5-10 minutes with the gong performance, then they start to sit down and talk with us, communicate with us. They laughing with each other, and they say that it's so interesting to have such virtual tour like this, virtual but not virtual, so half virtual. So this really meaningful for them, because they have a chance to get out and to talk with each other. So I think that this is really meaningful. And in the same time, because we cannot go to their place, so we produce some very simple tutorial video with the iPhone, how for them, help them to make the mask using their fabric, their traditional fabric. And they are so happy, they are so like proud that they can wear the mask with their like identity. And after that, they can share and they can sell to the neighborhood. So I really think that, of course, it's difficult times, but we can really think, look back and think for ourselves how we can change and how the community can change. Maybe they cannot sell to the tourists from UK, from Japan, but they can sell to their neighbor, to the people near them. So now they realize that they have a new market, new potential customers that are very close to them. It's great. It's great. Thank you.
And I can start to see now there's a huge amount of questions and comments coming in through the chat. Please keep that up. You're making my life very difficult, but I really appreciate it, because now it's my job to condense these all into something that I can kind of translate and use for the panel. And it looks like I got away with it because Eva's just raised her hand there. Yes. Please go ahead, Eva.
Okay, so I think that a couple of really interesting things were just brought up. One of them is the grief and the loss and shock coming from the COVID-19 crisis. And I think that it truly has been the canary in the coal mine for a lot of issues, especially here in America. The protests for Black Lives Matter have sort of, I think that they have been intense because of the COVID crisis. And I think that has shown me that in terms of cultural heritage, there can be a lot, it can bring forward a lot of anger and fear that I think is very justified. And we've had to have this conversation about Confederate monuments and landscapes in America that represent a history of oppression. And I'm wondering about how we can sort of mitigate those very reasonable responses of anger and fear and injustice, and sort of bring people into the fold in a sustainable way, and kind of about what pieces of cultural heritage we're prioritizing and what needs further context and what resources are being used for that. I think that's an interesting dimension to the conversation, especially when we think about how much we're thinking about loss in the context of the pandemic.
Richard.
Can I just jump in on that? Thank you. Loads to think about. Just on the statues point, one of the things more broadly I think heritage might be really useful for in terms of thinking through COVID and all the associated interconnection to this it's revealing, is just it's helping people think about long time better. And I was really struck by the way that public debate around, in England we had my old hometown in Bristol, Colston tipped into the harbour. And it was really notable that in a lot of the reporting, the BBC, Guardian, mainstream, not academic and scholarly, lots of attention was paid to the distance in time between when he was active and when they decided to memorialise him. And the same with Clive on the steps of the FCO. It was a different bunch of people who decided he was worth having a statue to. He was long dead. So this idea that heritage can kind of help us understand that things stretch out over a long time, that we might be used to thinking of them as moments, but actually they have duration. And I think one of the things about this particular crisis is that crisis thinking isn't going to be sustainable. If I can add yet another layer, Alison, you're quite right. It does mean lots of different things, lots of different people. But if we see everything as a crisis, we get burnt out. And I think we've learned that from thinking about climate. I think one of the things that we might think about heritage doing for us is helping us, is providing a measure of continuity. The world is bringing plenty of discontinuity shocks. And actually what might be really useful is for us to think, well, here's what we've got in common. Here's where the baseline was. You know, in a generation that have been since school, they'll have only touched elbows. They'll not know about rooms with closed windows. They'll not know an awful lot of what it means to be human now. And perhaps it's a job for us to remind them that actually there's these different ways of connecting as human beings. Alison. Sorry, Laura, I'm doing your job.
I love it. Please continue.
Yeah, so thanks for all of that, and for the comments that are terrific that are coming through. I mean, I think that one of the things that at the statues debate that was very strong in the USA and UK, perhaps not as so strong elsewhere, but the issue about artifacts, who they belong to, and what they're telling us about the way that we're telling our history, both past and also our present, and how we're shaping our future, which is very much Richard's area, has been really uncovered. This idea of fake news really did not arrive recently. There's an ancient tradition of fake news that I think our statues debate has really thrown open, and there's a very dark side to all of that. But the good side is that what we are hearing more and more are voices that are offering alternative stories, histories, different ways of understanding who we are, particularly in relation to our heritage. The work of incredible writers like Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's become a bestseller with her novel called Braiding Sweetgrass, which is all around the way that she, as a scientist and an artist, and she conflates those two terms so that it actually really is about curiosity, discovering the world, but also relating to the world in a different way, to nature, to communities. And it's become a bestseller. It's speaking to something very, very deep in all of us, which is this need to connect differently to our past, our future, and to the world around us. So I think it's, again, I'm being a bit sort of unhelpful here, but heritage itself is a term that kind of really is an interesting idea. And I think one of the things that we need to do with heritage is bring it to the now as well as to the future. And instead of thinking of it as something that exists, it actually is so critical now that we craft and shape how we perceive heritage and how vital it is to both protect the heritage that is being lost as a consequence of climate and environmental degradation, alongside conflict and all sorts of other things. But also with all of that loss goes deep knowledge. So how we can bring these different heritage voices into the space really quickly so that we can counter some of that fake news.
And so to draw something from that, to talk about sustainable working be something that is deeply embedded in both an individual connection and a collective connection through a community. I might pass over to Nikki because of the work that you've done around the world. How does the role community work within sustainable projects? Is that a tool or a solution? How do we work around collective sustainability?
Well, I think, I guess one of the main things that we have been doing, and I've done for quite a long time in my career, is kind of really the idea of being people-centered. And what does that mean? And how do we kind of, I guess one of the things within the programme is the definition and value of cultural heritage is determined by those people who are closest to it. And also then we kind of provide this enabling environment, I guess, which supports people to identify the opportunities and create their own opportunities for growth. But I guess one one area that we'll talk to you about is an example from our program in Colombia. And so we work with Indigenous communities, and 6 Indigenous communities who are absolutely amazing. And Laura, you were with me somewhere when we heard them talk about kind of their worldview and the way that they feel so connected to nature. It's all in one. And actually there are some things going on across the world which is making their places not very hospitable to live in anymore. And you kind of have those moments where you think, wow, we're in the wrong gang, you know. And their journey through the program with us with Cultural Heritage has been very much about, they've been deciding what is important to them for their own cultural sustainability and for their own survival and their welfare. And so I think the idea of kind of people being able to decide what's important from their past and how they want to bring that into their present, and also how they need to take that into the future. And that's the key here in terms of sustainability, because everybody has a different perspective and understanding of what their own heritage is and how it's important and how it fits into their lives. And I think kind of moving forward, those sorts of individual perspectives and then working together to create shared ownership or shared perspective is something kind of that we really do need to be thinking about moving forward. And, you know, with the community assemblies after, with the, Indigenous communities, as we started working with them in Colombia, they then kind of went on to design the whole project that was going to be working on with Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth. And just from that point of them deciding what was precious and important to them with their cultural heritage has kind of taken them on a huge journey, which has been around crafts, singing, eco-ethno, tourism, medicine, agriculture. And through kind of working with that, they have then developed community leaders, and they've done a lot of intergenerational exchange. So thinking about how that heritage comes from the past to the present and can be utilised more in the future, and been sharing and exchanging kind of knowledge between each other as groups. And I just think that that's where the magic lies. It's that people-centred, that inclusive, being able to listen, respond, and kind of really understand what the true value is that a cultural heritage brings to different people across the world. And it's in Kenya, it was completely different as well. And in Vietnam, it's been different. And in the UK, it's different. But there is something intrinsic within it, all of it, is that it gives people a sense of purpose, meaning for life. And it also is something that is really being incredible in the future. Yeah.
Brilliant. And in just 1 minute, I'm going to hand us over to Ichu, who's calling in from Dar es Salaam, who's going to tell us a little bit more about his experiences with working locally. And this is a theme that I'm seeing coming out in the chat, this idea of local heritage, sustainability, and working towards kind of models of tourism even. That's a theme that's come up once or twice. Before I do, Thoa, would you like to add anything to the discussion at this point that relates to community engagement?
Sorry, the internet connection maybe 2 seconds. Of course, it is not an easy question, a very difficult question. And now for us, for VIRI, also we got some kind of conflict happened during the project. So what we believe that they think that they are not understood, they are not trusted, and very important that they are not loved, not get love. So for us, how to make the situation better, or maybe we don't have one solution, but first we try to understand them. Why? Not only that's the problem, but the root cause, and especially we try to understand their culture. Why? And then we try to really with the care and with the real love to go and to come and to talk, and we try to identify a kind of model, role model, or like change maker. So some case, some positive case in the communities. Then if some of the case change, then they will inspire others easier. Then we change for everybody. So we only need to change for only some key person only. But in order to change them, we need to identify the right person. We need to really work with them to understand their culture, understand their root cause problem, and really work with love, with really understood them, and it works,
Fantastic, brilliant. Now with a bit of technical wizardry, I'm going to invite Ichu to join as a panelist. So hopefully he will now be appearing on our screen. Fantastic. Just give him a moment to settle in. And what we're going to do is pass over for a couple of minutes of testimonials so that you can all understand what ITSU's been working on over the past few years, which is fascinating. And he's got a question that he will pose to the audience, to the panelists. ITSU, are you happy to come off mic, off mute?
Yes, thank you very much, Laura, for inviting me and everyone. I've really enjoyed the discussions, and some of the things that I'm hearing, they really resonates with what we have been doing in Tanzania for a couple of years. So the major issue here that we have been trying to address is what is heritage exactly from the local people's perspectives and how they value that particular heritage. I can quickly give an example from the coast of Tanzania, where I have worked for the past 5 years. It seems like the meaning of heritage is contrary different from what we find in the government registrations. For instance, for these coastal people, when I asked them to rank what they name as heritage, the ocean was #1 of their heritage because of the livelihoods that they get from it. And #2 was the baobab trees on which they do spiritual practices. And within the government's registrations, there is nowhere where you can find either baobab trees, which are spiritual sites, or the ocean being part and parcel of the heritage of what is being protected. So there is a really need to try to understand what is heritage from the local perspective, and also understand the local knowledge and skills that we can use to protect the heritage sustainably. And now I have a couple of questions, not a couple, actually, two. Number one is, what kind of the innovative community engagement strategies that we can think of so as we ensure sustainability of heritage sites, in particular in some of developing countries like Tanzania, because these strategies may differ in terms of context and such kind of things. But the second question is, again, the value and sustainability of heritage from different perspectives. For instance, with the experience here in Tanzania, local people will not happily receive projects that aim at protecting heritage while they are suffering from hunger. The ability to get food is questionable. There is no medical care. And once you see like you are developing strategies to protect heritage, like you are valuing materials more than valuing people. How can we handle such a situation in protecting, to sustainably protect the heritage? Yeah.
Fantastic. ITSU, thank you so much for joining us. I wish we'd stayed for longer. We're going to pass back to the panelists to deal with that question. And I'm sending best wishes to you and your teams over in Dar, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up soon.
Yeah.
See you soon. Right. Bye. And who wants to take that one on to start? I'll volunteer you, Richard.
Could you just rephrase the question? I'm afraid I got distracted looking at the internet details of the book, and it's fascinating. I really like this idea of sort of moving behind kind of non-human, more than human artifacts and counting that as part of an archaeological focus, rather than something that's just attendant to a site. So, what was the question that you've got for us all?
Sure, I'll hand back to you if that's easier.
Yeah, thanks. My first question was, what kind of innovative ideas or strategies that we can use to bring the community engagement to the forefront? Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm going to be very quick on this because I know that Nikki and Alison will probably have more to say that will echo this, but I think being led by what they do rather than approaching with a kind of a toolkit that you know will work is absolutely key. This idea that Thoa as well, I'm work with love. I mean, that's such a, I don't want that on a t-shirt. I think that's the key thing for me, is to work with them to find out what they would consider innovative or what they would consider engaging, and to find out why, I mean, in my experience, there's times when I've gone in with things that I thought would engage a group of people, and I've had to learn from them why that's failed and what they'd have preferred instead. And I think making sure that you've got, in the project's design, you've got these channels, you've got these roles for people, so that you can get feedback as quickly as possible, that you can understand why it's landing, why it's not landing, rather than going in with a kind of what someone else on the Zoom call says, this should work. if you were going to press me though, I'd say one of the things we've been exploring a lot in Foresight is games and storytelling, and understanding that you can, if you can break out from formal processes, sometimes giving people a structure with which to spin their own stories in a sort of a sideways space, not a projective future space necessarily, but a kind of an alternative, it's just a story so we can say what we like kind of space. That can be a really interesting way of uncovering what's important to people. But I'll pass over to colleagues. Alison.
Thanks so much for the questions. They're terrific, and they're and I'll just borrow one thing that Thoa says, which is love. I think love is very important, that we bring a different way of approaching this into this space. So thank you so much for that. I just very briefly say something very specific about some things that we've learned, the principles, which are very much about bringing into this space some humility, an absolute commitment for co-creation and to learning and curiosity are really important. The humility bit is very, very important for communities, white people like myself who belong to traditions that have been our colonialism, our imperialist approach to extraction, to brutality requires a really serious, long, hard look at ourselves, because those dominant narratives about what creates culture, what creates value, what creates heritage really do need to be disrupted. Just a small thing, which is that we run something called Creative Climate Leadership. It's a program that's designed to really understand what cultural transformation needs to look like, and it's international. And we've worked with some really amazing cultural leaders in different places all over the world, one of which is from Zimbabwe, somebody called Philip Kusasa, who was going to try and be with us today, but I haven't been able to get hold of him in time. But Philip worked, and his was a lovely approach to this, the idea of innovation. He realized that with every tree that was cut down in his local community, they were losing incrementally more and more and more of their local knowledge, their value systems, their belief systems, their myths, their language, that the culture was being diminished as this overbearing, dominant culture was taking over. And he realized that unless he did something drastic, he would lose the essence of what it was to be who he is. So he used arts, he used the arts to engage the rest of the local community and communities around through dance and through putting on festivals that just celebrated what the forest was. And it's been a really successful program. He's brought people on board, not by telling them what they have to do or whatever, but by celebrating and revealing in sometimes very indirect ways, but really based on community building, community celebration, coming together in a sense of shared purpose. And it's been so terrific, and it's been very successful. It's been so successful actually that it's brought to attention the plight of some of the forest in that region to government. So when you talk about innovation, I think the principles really are that we've learned, JB has learned, is really, as you say, Richard, to listen to others, to bring to it a sense of one's own perspective, one's own bias, one's own privilege, to bring to it a lot of learning, but also to mobilize. So be really ambitious and really mobilize. And there is at some point a point at which I think we probably have to get out and make a lot of noise. And obviously with digital, there are lots of new opportunities to do that. Thank you.
Before I pass on to Nikki, I'm going to add another element to the conversation, which has become quite prevalent in the thread, which is around the role of kind of sustainable models of funding and how we can look at sustainable futures for projects, and indeed the kind of networks that build on heritage preservation as a whole. Tourism is a huge voice in the room of that, which is currently seeing an unparalleled experience of essentially being decimated almost everywhere. And as in the previous years, we've worked towards sustainable growth around tourism models. There's something that we can do now that replaces these issues? Is there something that we could be doing to act? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Thoa, but I feel like maybe you are the person to go to first with this, and then I'll follow up with Nikki again.
Thank you very much. Actually, when you talk about the sustainable future or sustainable element, then in theory, we just based on the three elements, try to advance the environment, economics, and social sustainabilities. So your first question, that what is the innovative ideas, should come from the local communities, because that's the only way to make it sustainable. So we can have some guidance that how to make that local idea to become like a sustainable, innovative for all the three elements. I can share some of the example in Vietnam. For example, I'm working for a project that have the people living near the forest. Actually, they also very poor, very poor. They come to the forest sometimes to hunt, do like an illegal hunt, and make some kind of animal like a disappear forever, and then cut the tree as well. So how we can have to change that. We try to see how the culture, long time ago, they make a very nice bamboo weaving, and but very big one, like a big basket, bag like that, which is only for daily use. So we asked them how we can really make this traditional bamboo weaving handicraft into the thing like environmental friendly. Actually, bamboo is good, it's environmental friendly. How to generate income for the people, and how to make really social impacts. And then they propose the idea that okay, make it like a smaller, the same thing but smaller backpack to sell to other people, and then they can use it for daily life as well. So it works. And then after that, they also think that okay, it's not good to hunt the animal in the natural forest. So they can change their practice, because they have another like a adaptable or another solution to live. So this idea should really come from the community themselves, and also some kind of guidance and support how to really make it sustainable for the three elements. And then how your second question, that how maybe how to let the people to protect the heritage, let the people to aware of that. So I also think that first easy thing that really to make them to feel pride of that, to if they feel really, if they pride, they feel proud of this, then they will protect it naturally. That's the first thing. And the second thing, that to make it like a benefit for them, like a living heritage. So if they can share with other people, they can express themselves through the cultural heritage, and that can help them to really preserve it, to keep it, and to learn, to earn from it, and to develop it as well. Then it's a great way. And all this really need like I really loved Alison to say co-creation. Need some kind of guidance, but the idea should come from the local communities, and they plan by themselves, they implement by themselves. Then the important that they have to benefit, really to benefit from that. I don't mean that benefit here that money, but can be money, but also can be like a spiritual, that they feel so happy when they're doing that. That's also very good. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. And Nikki, I'll leave it to you.
I guess, you know, what we, in terms of the people-centered or community-led things, I think what we found to be the most valuable thing is to actually not start with any kind of expectation of what we wanting to achieve. And actually the whole thing about the program, and again in work that I used to do in County Durham, which I had a wonderful time there, was kind of just understanding, trusting in a process and being quite open, and kind of thinking about a couple of key questions, which is who, how, why, and kind of understanding all of that then leads to the what that you're going to do. And I think kind of going in and working with communities and being really open to different definitions and values, and seeing kind of where cultural heritage plays a key role in that community, and trying to kind of unearth that, and for us to be more open in our definitions about kind of what cultural heritage means. I think that's been sort of really, really key. But I also think what's been interesting through our work again is kind of looking at and understanding the idea of the work in the communities, And I remember you saying kind of about policy and things, and then how do those two things meet? You know, how do you get kind of these information flows of kind of what's important to who at different points through the system? And, you know, we found it really, one of the things we found worked really well is how we've kind of looked at how we can create or explore new ways of doing things which kind of operate across different areas of sort of the ecosystem or kind of sectors, societies and geographies. So trying to kind of mobilize different sharing, exchanging and learning and kind of trying different things, just trying them and seeing how they work, which kind of build on and utilize the expertise, ambition, talent, skills within a place in kind of an inclusive and equitable way. And, you know, we've really found some great stuff happening. And I think it's starting off with kind of people and their definition of heritage and finding out how it can work for them, and then sort of then being able to kind of match what other people see as being important as heritage, and being kind of open and collaborative to bring together in a way to kind of find new solutions or try new ways of doing things is a great way forward.
Excellent. I'm going to wrap up a minute, but Alison, did you want to add one thing?
Yeah, I've just been looking at some of the questions, and there's some really, really important questions which feel very urgent to address, which are coming through about how COVID-19 has devastated so many museums and so many conservatories and livelihoods. And I think this is really tough, and there's no easy answers to it. But I just wanted something that came up again with you, Nikki. This whole thing about policy, the point is that cultural policy around this at the moment is broken. There's no question about it. It has completely failed to recognise culture and heritage as being part of this is big national and international policy frameworks. There is some work that's going forward to put cultural heritage and culture into the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the assessment around climate impact. But this is something that I think if anybody in this conversation has any capacity to use policy as a way of changing this is something that is absolutely crucial, because that's the thing, whether it's through citizen engagement or whatever, it is the thing that is going to create the investment mechanisms. And the heritage and cultural sector really needs to get on the front foot so that we can lead this conversation. Policy is not done to us. We can actually be determined and more self-determining around what policy we need in order to develop a thriving sector. And I think that's something very urgent that we should be thinking about now.
Brilliant, thank you, Alison. And before I wrap up, I think there was another question in the chat that really is a great point to end, because it's essentially a bit of a summary from Tom Lewis in the British Council, who's working on culture and development. He asks, essentially he says 4 questions in one, so that's a caveat. What, in the opinion of the panel, is the one factor that we should have in keeping cultural heritage protection initiatives sustainable, whether that's economically or socially, environmentally, or culturally? And this is a very quick answer for you all, but what's the one thing that you think is integral to being sustainable? And Richard, I'll go for you first.
Thanks very much. Land that on me. I must admit my instincts are just to push back a little bit and say, why are we so sure there's only one? And I think one of the things that's been really interesting about the whole COVID frame for this speech, for what's going on at the moment and this event in particular, is that it's showing us how complex the world is and how things can be they have lots of causes, and they are themselves lots of things. There have been good aspects about the lockdown. There have been relationships established with family. There's been people spending less time in polluting commutes. There's been some positive aspects, as well as probably for those same people, terrible psychosocial impacts of living in a world where, in a country where 45,000 people are not with us who should be, and both of those things are true at the same time. The world's quite complex. So I'm kind of resistant to looking for an X factor, but that's possibly just the curmudgeonly academic in me. I don't know if anyone else has actually found it, and I'm going to kick myself for not having claimed it. Or I'm going to repeat the work with love approach and just say, well, actually, let's just have that concern and that care for other people and be driven by that if you have to pick one.
I'd say you can't steal that from Thoa unless she lets you steal it. So Thoa, are you happy with that?
I think that for the heritage, cultural heritage should combine all. We cannot select only one element. So, but it can be.
Brilliant. How about you, Nikki?
Yeah, I think just following on from there, holistic, but again, for me, I know I've repeated this quite a lot, but people-centered, you know, people at the heart of everything that we do. That's in heart, and I've got all of them in there, having our heart, people-centered, sneaked them in.
There's a lot of t-shirts to be printed. How about you, Alison?
Well, by this time I get the advantage of a compound answer, which is Paul Richard wanted. So all of that. But also, I think, you know, heritage is an interconnected system to everything else. So if we can really think about interconnectivity in a different way, really open our minds to that and act with huge generosity, I think we're in a great place.
Fantastic. And I'm so sorry, we've run out of time, as we did last time. And again, what we see here is that this is a big issue that we've hopefully just cracked open today. So I can see from the chat that people are forging connections, asking questions, even finding some answers and suggesting some different things. So thank you very much. And I'm going to thank everyone for their amazing contributions throughout. In the coming weeks, we're going to work to integrate this feedback from the audience and from our panelists into the overall direction of the conversation. And in 2 weeks' time, we're coming back on the 6th of August for our 4th session to discuss development strategies in heritage protection. Lizzie's going to do me a favour and pop the link to that event down in the chat now so that you can go and hopefully efficiently sign up and join us next time. I'm afraid I won't actually be with us, but I'm really pleased to report that you'll be upgraded to the wonderful hosting skills of Nikki, who's doing me the huge favour of stepping in until I return for the 5th and final session on the 20th of August. As I'm just rounding this off, I'm also going to highlight the incredible work that Chris has been doing whilst we've all been busy nattering, and just to let you all have a quick look at that. After this session and before the next one, please get in touch by using that hashtag #CultureInCrisisConversation or by emailing us directly at cultureincrisisvam.ac.uk if you want to elaborate or share something in greater detail than the Twitter character limit allows. So just to finally say an absolutely huge thanks to our speakers for their generosity in sharing their time, insights and experiences. And again, a huge thanks to those of you in the audience who have made my life really easy in a way, because you've provided such incredible sort of nuggets of information and insights and sharing your ideas and experiences too. We really look forward to welcoming as many of you back as possible in 2 weeks' time. And don't forget to join that discussion online or by email. Thanks for being with us today, and goodbye.